Welcome back, everybody. I've been playing a lot of Resident Evil recently because of Resident Evil Requiem, and it got me thinking about just how many villains in that series have unbelievably tragic backstories. And once I started thinking about that, it opened up a much bigger question. What are some of the most tragic villain backstories in gaming as a whole? Because some villains are evil just to be evil. They want power, chaos, destruction, whatever. But some villains are way more interesting than that. Some of them were manipulated, some were tortured, some were infected, some lost everything, and some were genuinely trying to do the right thing before everything went horribly wrong. Sometimes it's a virus turning someone into a monster. Sometimes it's years of abuse destroying someone's mind. Sometimes it's learning a truth so horrifying that it completely shatters a person's identity. And I think those are often the villains that stick with us the most. Because even while we're fighting them, there's still a part of us that feels bad for them. And of course, this is all just my opinion, so let me know some of your picks in the comments below. Before we get started, there will be major spoilers for all of the games I mention here. So you've been warned. So in no particular order, here are some of the most tragic villain backstories in gaming. Starting off with Doc Ock from Marvel's Spider-Man.
You're fighting the wrong man. But have it your way.
Because this is one of the best examples of a villain whose fall hurts, specifically because you get to know the person before the monster. When the game starts, Otto Octavius is not presented as some insane supervillain waiting for his moment. He's Peter Parker's mentor. He's brilliant, kind, and clearly passionate about the work he's doing. He's trying to create advanced prosthetics that can genuinely help people, and Peter looks up to him. But at the same time, Otto is also clearly a broken down man in a lot of ways. Norman Osborn has humiliated him, pushed him aside, and treats him like a failure.
The truth. Okay. The truth is, you were only ever worth a damn when you worked for me. The truth is, you could never accept that I'm better than you. You're a failure, Otto, and you always will be.
On top of that, Otto is dealing with a degenerative illness that is slowly destroying his body. So already the pieces are there. He's desperate, he's angry, and he feels like the world has robbed him of everything he's worked for. To try and solve both his scientific goals and his physical decline, Otto creates the neural interface and mechanical arms. But once he hooks himself up to that technology, things start spiraling. The interface doesn't just help him control the arms, it amplifies the darkest parts of his mind. His resentment towards Norman grows into obsession. His frustration turns him into full-blown vengeance, and before long, that bitterness transforms him into Dr. Octopus. Then everything gets worse. He forms the Sinister Six, helps unleash chaos across New York, and is directly involved in spreading Devil's Breath throughout the city. And what makes all of that tragic is that Peter is there to watch it happen. This isn't just Spider-Man fighting some random villain. It's Peter watching someone he admired completely lose himself. That final confrontation is so effective because it's not just a superhero fight. It's a student watching his mentor destroy his own legacy out of rage. Otto didn't start out as a monster. He became one because pain, pride, and hatred consumed him. Next up is the Baker family from Resident Evil 7.
Welcome to the family, son.
And this is one of the saddest examples on the list because they are not just villains, they are victims. When you first encounter the Bakers, they are terrifying. Jack is this relentless, almost unstoppable force. Margaret is grotesque and horrifying. Lucas is one of the creepiest characters in the entire series, and at first they just seem like this twisted, insane family straight out of a Southern Gothic nightmare. But the reality is way worse and way sadder. The Bakers were originally just a normal family living in Louisiana. Jack and Margaret were not born monsters. Everything changed when Evelyn's ship crashed nearby and they found her. They took her in because they believed she was just a lost little girl who needed help. But Evelyn was not just a child. She was a bioweapon created to infect and control people through mold. Once Evelyn entered their lives, she slowly infected the family and took over their minds. Jack and Margaret lost control of themselves, and they were wrapped into the monstrous versions we see in the game. Their bodies changed, their personalities changed, and they became extensions of Evelyn's will. They still had fragments of their real selves buried beneath all of that infection and manipulation, but for most of the game, those real versions of them were trapped. That's what makes them so tragic. Jack especially has moments where you can tell there was once a good man there, a father and husband who is trying to protect his family, but Ethan doesn't meet that version of Jack. He meets what Evelyn turned him into. Now, Lucas is a little different because even before Evelyn, Lucas had already had some serious issues, so he's not quite as sympathetic as his parents, but the family as a whole is just devastating. Their lives were destroyed because they tried to help what they thought was an innocent little girl. Instead, they were infected, enslaved, and transformed into monsters against their will. That is classic Resident Evil tragedy right there. Next is the Arkham Knight. And this one is tragic because it's built entirely on trauma, torture, and the complete destruction of trust.
You're not going anywhere, old man. Tri-weave titanium-coated armor plate. Nice. Unless you know exactly where to shoot.
The Arkham Knight is revealed to be Jason Todd, the second Robin, and Jason's story is rough. After becoming Batman's partner, Jason is captured by the Joker and held prisoner for over a year. During that time, Joker tortures him physically and psychologically, breaking him down piece by piece. But Joker doesn't just beat him, he manipulates him. He makes Jason believe that the Batman is never coming.
I saw him kill you. Don't you dare lie to me! How long did you wait before replacing me, huh? A month? A week? I trusted you! And you just left me to die!
And that idea is what really destroys Jason. Because at that point, it's not just pain anymore, it's betrayal. Or at least what Jason believes to be betrayal. By the time he escapes or is freed, he is no longer the same person. The trauma has completely reshaped him. Instead of returning as an ally, he reinvents himself as the Arkham Knight and dedicates his life to destroying Batman. That's what makes his story so sad. Jason isn't some villain who suddenly decided he wanted power. He is a victim who is tortured until he became consumed by rage. The Arkham Knight persona is basically trauma turned into a military operation. Everything about him is built around pain and the need to make Batman suffer the same way he suffered. And even when he's angry, violent, and trying to tear Bruce down, there's still something heartbreaking about him, because underneath all that armor is still Jason Todd, someone who never recovered from what was done to him. Next up on the list, I have Takuto Maruki from Persona 5 Royal.
I am thou, and...
who I think is one of gaming's best examples of a villain whose downfall begins with genuinely good intentions. Maruki starts as a counselor, someone who wants to help people process pain and trauma. He is not cruel. He is not power hungry. He doesn't want to dominate the world for the sake of ego. The event that truly breaks him is what happens to Rumi, the woman he loves. After a violent home invasion leaves Rumi's parents dead, she becomes so traumatized that she can barely function. Maruki watches someone he loves completely collapse under the weight of unbearable pain, and he becomes desperate to do something about it. When his persona abilities awaken, he uses them to alter her cognition and erase the traumatic memories. But in doing so, he also erases her connection to him. That's the key moment. Maruki gets exactly what he wanted. He removes her pain, but in the process, he loses her anyway. And that emotional failure becomes the foundation for everything that comes later. He starts believing that if he has the power to erase suffering, then maybe he should use that power on a much larger scale. By the end of Persona 5 Royal, Maruki creates a reality where everyone can live in an idealized version of happiness. People don't have to suffer. They don't have to lose anyone. They don't have to face trauma or grief or disappointment, but the cost is that Maruki is deciding all of that for them. He is effectively rewriting reality and stripping away human agency in the name of kindness. That's why he's so tragic. Everything starts with a man who could not bear to watch someone he loves suffer. His villainy doesn't come from sadism. It comes from grief, empathy, and the inability to accept that pain is a part of life. Next up on the list is Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII. One of the most iconic villains in gaming, and one whose backstory is a lot sadder than people sometimes give it credit for. Before Sephiroth became the monster we know him as, he is Shinra's greatest soldier. He is treated like a living legend. He's powerful, admired, and almost mythic. But everything starts falling apart during the Nibelheim incident. There, Sephiroth discovers documents revealing the truth about his origins. He learns that he was created through experiments involving Jenova and comes to believe that Jenova is his mother. More importantly, he realizes that his life was built on lies. The identity he had, the person he thought he was, all of it begins to collapse. That revelation completely breaks him. Sephiroth descends into madness, burns Nibelheim to the ground, murders innocent people, and kills Cloud's mother. He goes from war hero to mass murderer because the truth of his existence shatters whatever humanity was anchoring him. Instead of seeing himself as a man, he starts seeing himself as something completely different, something superior, something separate. That's what makes Sephiroth tragic. Yes, he becomes terrifying. Yes, he commits horrifying acts. But his fall begins with an identity crisis so extreme that it destroys his mind. He learns that he was never what he thought he was, and instead of surviving that truth, he is consumed by it. Next up is Renoir from Clair Obscur Expedition 33.
Which expedition are you from?
And what makes Renoir work so well is that his tragedy feels very human. Renoir is a character shaped by grief and loss. And that grief doesn't just affect him emotionally, it defines what he becomes. His story is built around the inability to move on, the inability to let go, and the desperate desire to hold on to something that is already gone. And that's always one of the saddest kinds of villains to me. The ones who really aren't trying to conquer the future as much as they are drowning in the past. Renoir's pain pushes him into destructive choices because instead of processing what happened, he becomes consumed by it. He clings to memory, to loss, to the impossible hope that something can be restored. And once someone starts making choices based on that kind of grief, it becomes very easy for them to justify crossing lines they never would have crossed before. And that's what makes Renoir tragic. He does not feel like evil for the sake of evil. He feels like a person whose emotional devastation warped the way he sees everything else. You can still see the humanity inside the pain, and that's what makes him compelling. Next, we have Baldur from God of War. Whose tragedy comes from one of the cruelest gifts in gaming. Baldur's mother, Freya, loved him so much that she used magic to make him invulnerable. On paper, that sounds like protection, but the spell came with an awful cost. Baldur lost the ability to feel anything. He could not feel pain, but he could also not feel warmth, pleasure, comfort, touch, taste, nothing. So instead of being protected, Baldur ends up trapped in a numb, empty existence. Imagine living like that for years. No sensation, no relief, no joy, no connection, just emptiness. That would destroy anyone, and it destroys Baldur too. By the time we meet him in God of War, he is furious, unstable, and obsessed with breaking the curse. And most of that rage is aimed at Freya, because in his mind, the person who claimed to love him is the one who made his life unbearable. That's why Baldur is so tragic. He's not just angry because he feels like it. He's angry because he has been denied the basic ability to experience life. His violence is awful, but it comes from real suffering. He is a man driven mad by emptiness. Up next, I am putting Great Grey Wolf Sif from Dark Souls. Now, this one is a little different because Great Grey Wolf Sif is not a traditional villain, but emotionally, Sif absolutely belongs in this conversation. Sif was the loyal companion of Knight Artorias, one of the great heroes who fought the Abyss. At some point, Artorias and Sif journey into the Abyss together, but Artorias is overwhelmed. In his final moments, he uses his great shield to protect Sif, sacrificing himself so that Sif can survive. After Artorias dies, Sif remains behind and takes on the duty of guarding his grave and keeping others from following the same doomed path into the Abyss. And that is what makes the fight with Sif so heartbreaking. You're not fighting a beast guarding treasure. You're fighting a loyal companion, still honoring a fallen master. Sif's whole role in the story is built around loyalty, grief, and duty. And if you've played the DLC first, it becomes even sadder because Sif may recognize you. That one detail changes the entire emotional tone of the fight. It no longer feels like a boss battle, it feels like something neither side should have to do. This is peak Dark Souls tragedy. Next, we have Scorpion from Mortal Kombat.
That is not me.
And this is easily one of gaming's most iconic revenge stories. Before he was Scorpion, he was Hanzo, a member of the Ryu clan. Then everything was taken from him. His family was murdered, his clan was wiped out, he himself was killed, and after his death, he is resurrected as Scorpion, a revenant driven almost entirely by rage and need for revenge. For years, Hanzo believes that Sub-Zero and the Lin Kuei were responsible for the destruction of his family and clan, so that grief and hatred become his whole identity. He hunts Sub-Zero down and kills him in retaliation, but later learns that he was manipulated. The truth behind what happened is more complicated, and his pain had been used to turn him into a weapon. And that's what makes Scorpion tragic. His story begins with losing absolutely everything, then instead of being allowed to grieve or heal, that pain is weaponized until he becomes a living embodiment of vengeance. He is not just angry, he is trapped in anger. His suffering never gets to become anything else. That's why Scorpion works so well. Underneath all the fire and all the iconic moments is someone whose life was completely annihilated. And finally, I have the Hollow Knight from Hollow Knight. Which honestly might be one of the saddest examples on this list. The Hollow Knight was one of the countless vessels created by the Pale King and the White Lady in an attempt to contain the Radiance and save Hallownest from infection. These vessels were born in the Abyss, and the ones deemed imperfect were discarded. The Hollow Knight was the one chosen. It was raised, trained, and shaped for one purpose only, to become a living prison for the Radiance. And that is already tragic enough, but it gets even worse, because the entire plan depended on the vessel becoming completely empty. No emotion, no thought, no attachment, no self. But the Hollow Knight was not truly empty. Somewhere along the line, some trace of feeling or identity remained, and because of that, the Radiance was eventually able to break free through it. So the Hollow Knight spends its existence carrying the burden of an entire kingdom, only to fail because it was never truly allowed to be what it was supposed to be. It was created for sacrifice, raised for sacrifice, and ultimately destroyed by a purpose that never chose. When you fight the Hollow Knight, it doesn't feel triumphant. It feels miserable. It feels like you are witnessing the end result of a cruel plan that doomed someone from the very beginning. And those are my picks for the most tragic villain backstories in gaming. And I think what makes these characters so memorable is that they linger with us differently than standard villains. Anyone can write a bad guy who wants power, but it takes something special to write a villain where even while you're trying to stop them, part of you feels sorry for them. Whether it's Doc Ock losing himself to vengeance, the Baker family being turned into monsters against their will, Jason Todd being tortured until he became the Arkham Knight, Maruki trying to erase pain by rewriting reality, Sephiroth having his identity shattered, Baldur being trapped in numbness, Scorpion being consumed by revenge, or the Hollow Knight being born for sacrifice. These are villains and antagonists whose pain is a huge part of what makes them unforgettable. They remind us that some of the best villains in gaming are not the ones who are purely evil. They're the ones who feel human, the ones who were broken, manipulated, infected, tortured, or forced into roles they never should have had to bear. So let me know in the comments, what are some of the most tragic villain backstories in gaming to you? And are there any big ones that I missed? As always, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.